is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The COVID-19 death toll surpasses 10,000 globally, with nearly 250,000 confirmed cases. African countries announce more measures to contain the outbreak as the number of infections soars to over 800. And Trump comes under increasing criticism over his handling of the crisis. Also in this newscast, the East Africa locust invasion. Fears of food security worsen as a new breeding cycle begins. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. And with me is Uche Okoronkwo with a preview of your business news.
Thank you, Lindy. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Uganda turns to the World Bank for a $190 million loan to cushion against the coronavirus impact. And Kenyan flower farms lose 40% of sales as global demand shrinks. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. Well, we start the hour with the Africa update of the coronavirus pandemic. 36 countries across the continent have now reported over 815 cases of COVID-19. Let's take a look at those numbers by region. Northern Africa has the highest number of confirmed cases. Tunisia has reported 15 new cases, bringing the total there to 54, while Egypt has so far registered 256 infections of the respiratory disease from a previous count of 210. The government said that during the flight ban and school shutdown, hotels and all educational facilities will be sanitized. Algeria now has 90 cases of the coronavirus, mostly in the Blida area south of the capital. President Abdelmadjid Tebboune earlier this week ordered an end to street protests. Meanwhile, Morocco has 61 confirmed cases of COVID-19. The government has closed all mosques, schools and entertainment venues and has banned all international passenger flights. In West Africa, Senegal has the highest number of infections. Niger and Cape Verde, on the other hand, have announced their index cases. In the case of the former, the patient is a 36-year-old Niger citizen who had recently traveled to Togo, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire and Burkina Faso. Ghana's cases, on the other hand, have risen to 16 as the country confirmed 5 new cases. In East Africa, Ethiopia has confirmed 3 more cases of COVID-19, bringing the total in the country to 9. In Central Africa, Chad has confirmed its first case of the coronavirus, a Moroccan national who had traveled to the country from Cameroon. Numbers are also increasing in Southern Africa. South Africa has recorded over 50 more cases in the country, bringing the number to well over 200. Overall, the World Health Organization is reporting 19 deaths and 69 recoveries on the continent. Well, Tunisia has reported 15 new COVID-19 cases, most of which are in regions that were previously unaffected. This brings the total number of cases in the country to 54, with over 11,000 people still in self-isolation or quarantine. CGTN's Adnan Chouachi has those details.
7 persons among the contaminated cases were hospitalized, 4 at the Abdulrahman Memi Hospital in Ariana Governorate in Tunis and 3 at the Farhat Hashed Hospital in Sousse. Half of those infected are women. Out of the 54 cases, 44 are of Tunisian nationality.
We can only talk about a contaminated area when we have more than 10 confirmed cases in a limited geographical area. Confinement in certain areas is possible. Total confinement in all regions requires consultation and intervention by all regulatory authorities.
President of the Republic Qais Said chaired the meeting of the Supreme Council of the Armies at Carthage Palace. The meeting focused on the general situation in the country, particularly the necessary measures to prevent the spread of coronavirus.
The meeting was an opportunity for the head of state to inquire about the preparedness of the National Army with all its divisions to contribute to efforts to combat the coronavirus. The National Army stands ready to respond to any medical and logistical reinforcement request to contain the virus and preserve the lives and safety of Tunisians.
The capital city Tunis is the first governorate in terms of number of confirmed cases of infection with COVID-19, with 17 patients, according to the latest data on the developments of the pandemic in Tunisia.
The situation has become more complicated in hospitals. People are terrified. They must stay at home to prevent the spread of the virus and infection. The army will play an important role in providing support to the medical staff and the coronavirus crisis unit.
Until March 19, about 11,000 people had been placed in self-isolation, including 3,340 who have completed the period of self-isolation and more than 7,560 who still comply with this health measure. According to the Ministry of Health, the average age of the contaminated persons is 45 years. It varies between 3 months and 83 years old. The tests carried out on 4 people suspected of having contracted coronavirus, including family members of the only confirmed case in Sfax Governorate, are negative. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Now, communication remains an important part of campaigns to prevent the further spread of the coronavirus. And to help share information on the outbreak, South Africa's National Department of Health has unveiled COVID-19 Connect, a WhatsApp-based helpline. It delivers accurate, up-to-date information to people across South Africa during this COVID-19 pandemic. CGTN's Angela Coppola tells us more.
In less than a week, the service has reached over 1.5 million people and sent 15 million messages. It's the brainchild of the Preikeld Foundation.
The main things that people are looking for are up-to-date news, the latest releases. The moment there's a press release, it's updated on the system. And so that's when we get the spikes in traffic, and it's really interesting to see what people are looking for on the app.
The technology behind the quick rollout has been in development for 2 years. It's called Turn.
So Turn really is an easy way for people to access the WhatsApp Business API. So that's to be able to send large-scale messages or to run large-scale WhatsApp bots through the enterprise system of WhatsApp. So it's not like the app that you have on your phone. It's something that's much more automated, but we've built a really easy user interface so that you can do this at really large scale. You don't have to have really, really technical people to be able to do it.
The development of the product continues. Users are asking questions and making requests and suggestions as well.
So we did start with English, get things up and running really quickly. We're planning to expand in the next week or so to Zulu, and we're going to be adding languages as the translations become available. We know it's really important to be able to deliver things in the language that people speak, because it makes it much more accessible.
The rollout has involved several partners, including WhatsApp, the National Department of Health, and the Clinton Health Access Initiative. This is a prime example of technology working to help people understand what the consequences of COVID-19 are, what they need to look out for, and whether or not they should be tested for the virus. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Still in South Africa, the country's National Taxi Council plans to implement stringent hygiene measures targeting drivers and commuters nationwide. Taxis are the main mode of transport for millions of ordinary South Africans. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has the details.
The taxi industry transports over 16 million people daily, and it represents a critical sector in the transportation industry here in South Africa. President Cyril Ramaphosa has called on people to avoid using taxis and buses where possible to limit possible exposure to the coronavirus. And taxi commuters have been left wondering what else they can do to protect themselves, as they have no other choices but to use taxis on a daily basis. The South African National Taxi Council, SANTACO, has now made it clear that all will be done to protect their clientele.
We have identified major taxi ranks in South Africa, and I must indicate we have more than 1,000 taxi ranks in the country, but we have identified for now major taxi ranks in the country in the 9 provinces. Each province has major taxi ranks. That is what we have identified, and we are going to be concentrating on a few days on those ranks before we depart to other ranks. At this taxi ranks, we will not only roll out our education, training and prevention campaign, but also ensure stringent monitoring for compliance of procedures and protocols that we call the coronavirus protocols of SANTACO.
Taxi ranks and taxis are now being cleaned and disinfected.
The taxi ranks and ranking facilities are kept clean and disinfected using certified chemicals. That all taxis are cleaned on a daily basis and disinfected as frequent as possible to ensure that chances of contaminations are reduced. All taxis to have sanitizers that are offered to all passengers as they enter the taxi and after handling taxi fares.
Taibosh says they will be meeting with taxi owners to ensure that the message on how to be more cautious on the job is communicated. While the taxi industry is reassuring the commuters, some of them are basically unconvinced.
To be honest, I don't feel safe. I feel scared, especially using the Breed taxi rank. There's like not even 100, like thousands of people using the taxi rank. It's not safe, it's dirty on itself.
I really think that we have no other choice, but I would commend that people take precautionary measures so that we stay safe, because right now we use public transport and that's the only transport we can use, because I was looking at it this morning because I use the Rea Vaya buses and there's so many of us in the morning and there's nothing we can do. Just take precautionary measures and stay clean.
Government is urging South Africans not to panic and adhere to the proper precautionary measures. Yudisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, let's bring you today's global COVID-19 update. There has been a dramatic rise in coronavirus cases all over the world, with the global death toll now passing 10,000. Nearly 250,000 people have been infected in more than 160 countries. Italy has now seen more deaths than China, with over 3,400 people killed there. The nation is reporting more than 5,300 new cases. Spain is Europe's second most affected country, with nearly 20,000 infections and over 1,000 deaths. Iran is seeing similar numbers. The United States reports more than 6,000 new cases, taking the total to over 14,000. But the numbers appear to be slowing in South Korea, with fewer than 100 deaths, and new infections in China continue to slow. Although it does face a wave of imported cases, all of its 45 new cases are infected passengers arriving from other countries. Hubei province has reported no new cases for several days, and nearly 90% of patients in China have recovered. Let's take a closer look at the United States now. Cases in the country have risen to more than 14,000. There have been a total of 205 deaths in the country. California's governor has issued a statewide order for people to stay at home, while the president is urging the country to remain positive. CGTN's Nathan King has more.
With the number of cases and deaths accelerating in the US President Donald Trump Thursday focused attention on possible future treatments and cures for the virus, which are, let's face it, months away at best. Masks and ventilators are still in short supply. Trump chose to be positive in the face of the unknown.
We'll be back, and I actually think we'll be back stronger than ever before, because we learned a lot during this period of time.
A dose of reality followed, however. The US president hosted a video conference with governors of this nation's embattled states. They called for more federal help, leadership, testing and equipment. The White House says some states must take the priority over others, and it has nothing to do with politics.
Still, over 50% of the cases come from 3 states. This is why we continue to prioritize testing in those states.
Underlying the global nature of this crisis, the US State Department issued a level 4 travel advisory, the highest, essentially telling Americans not to travel and those abroad to come home if they can. And work continues on an unprecedented $1 trillion economic stimulus package. Europe may be the epicenter of this pandemic right now, but fears are the US could be the next center. The White House is insisting that the nation is ready. The rest of the nation isn't so sure. Nathan King, CGTN, at the White House.
Well, meanwhile, Donald Trump has once again referred to the novel coronavirus as the China virus. His rhetoric has sparked criticism in the United States, with many accusing him of instigating racism and xenophobia.
It comes from China.
New York-based journalist Jill Filipovich says this is Trump's strategy to hide his slow response to the outbreak, blaming someone else. In an article published on CNN's website, Filipovich says the president isn't acting out of ignorance, he is acting out of malice. Trump's rhetoric has also drawn criticism from a number of US politicians, including former Vice President and Democratic frontrunner Joe Biden. The CNBC has quoted a statement from Biden's campaign team which says Trump downplayed the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. The statement says, as this crisis exploded on his watch, Trump is desperately lashing out to try to cover up his incompetence and mismanagement. Meanwhile, Michael D. Swain, a security expert at Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, says Trump's move is for purely political reasons, which undermines American and global interests. He says what America really needs is decisive, informed and responsible action. Rory Cohn, CGTN.
Well, Italy has reached a grim milestone, becoming the country with the most COVID-19 deaths. More than 3,400 people have died. Italian healthcare workers are warning their counterparts about the grave situation they too could face. Alex Fraser reports from Milan.
Italy now has the highest number of deaths from COVID-19 after figures released by the Italian government this evening confirmed it's now passed the death toll even in China. To put this into perspective, based on population size, China's population size is 20 times that of Italy. Lombardy, the region at the centre of this epidemic, is facing a major public health emergency. Bergamo, a city in Lombardy, has the most cases in Europe. After many deaths, coffins are unable to be buried and they've been building up in graveyards. Today the army were brought in to move the coffins. In this part of Italy, there are many towns where everybody has a story of somebody they know being infected. This is a country that relies so much on face-to-face contact, large families, and as a result, the spread of this virus has been devastating. A plane of 12 Chinese doctors arrived at Milan's Malpensa airport yesterday, bringing with them 17 tons of medical equipment, including 400,000 masks. Lombardy is currently the region most infected by the virus in Italy. After meeting with the Chinese delegation today, the president of the Lombardy region, Attilio Fontana, said that the Chinese doctors were amazed by the number of people still out travelling on public transport and out on the street. They've suggested that the public transport, which is still running, should be stopped and all non-essential production work with it. The governor said that he will speak to the Italian Prime Minister to see if stricter measures can in fact be imposed after those conversations they had today. Earlier today, in an interview with Corriere della Sera, Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte said that containment from the lockdown is working, but it will have to continue past the end date of the original decree, and that was supposed to be at the end of March. But that's going to continue, and restaurants, bars and shops, with the exception of supermarkets and pharmacies, have all been closed since last Wednesday. Alex Fraser for CGTN in Milan.
Meanwhile, in China, today marks the second day of 0 new infections in the COVID-19 epicenter of Wuhan. Sun Tianwan is there.
Wuhan has reported 0 new confirmed cases for 2 days in a row, according to the National Health Commission. Now, over the past 2 months, my colleagues and I saw the numbers rise to thousands a day, then gradually decline to hundreds, and now to 0, like the WHO said. It's an amazing achievement that China has. Local residents who have been under lockdown for almost 2 months were also cheering when they heard the good news, news of victory. Wuhan is gradually loosening some of its regulations accordingly as the situation in the city cools down. Wuhan announced yesterday that groceries, pharmacies and food markets in 0 infection communities will be allowed to reopen. And residents may also undertake minor activities within their own communities. Now, some residents told me they hope to go back to work as soon as possible. Now, officials say water, electricity and food production are on the top of companies' back-to-work list, and followed by finance and shipping like ports, cargoes. However, places such as theaters, gyms and beauty salons are still closed until the outbreak ends, since Wuhan is still categorized as a high-risk region. So far, nearly half of Hubei's companies and factories are back to work. That's about 7,600 firms. At the same time, Hubei authorities say the province will allow more people to come back from outside Hubei to help boost production and work. Now, people who have their health code via a mobile application issued by other provinces no longer need to provide additional health proof or health statements and paperwork to go through checkpoints and or into the community.
Now, as various regions combat the spread of COVID-19, China says it's joining efforts by sending aid to over 80 countries.
We've been providing assistance in 4 aspects. First, the Chinese government has pledged aid to 82 countries, the World Health Organization and the African Union. This includes testing kits, masks and protective suits. Medical supplies have already reached some destinations. Second, we are boosting cooperation in medical technology. China is sharing knowledge on diagnosis and treatment plans with other countries. Third, we are stepping up aid between local governments. We have already sent medical supplies to several cities in South Korea, Japan, Italy and others. Fourth, a number of Chinese private enterprises and NGOs have also been sending donations across the world.
Well, that is where we leave our coronavirus coverage for now. Here's a look at what's coming up after the break. Still ahead, the East Africa locust invasion, fears of food security worsen as a new breeding cycle begins. And find out how volunteers are supporting the hearing impaired in Tunisia.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
Who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. Along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Efforts are continuing in Somalia to control the Locust invasion. The semi-autonomous region of Somaliland is spraying biopesticide and increasing surveillance efforts using an innovative tool called Locust 3. CGTN's Tuli Shabalala has that story.
Somaliland is trying to contain the formation of new swarms of desert locusts. Control operations were recently carried out on the outskirts of Garissa town. The breeding grounds have been sprayed with pesticides.
We prefer to use this pesticide, biopesticide, for safety to the animal. We have many of livestock in Somaliland, you know? This is for in Somaliland, and also this biopesticide safety for the friendly for the environment, and also the safety for the people in the area or the community people, and also for the staff that spray this biopesticide.
Now, a new innovative tool called the Locust 3 is set to enhance surveillance. Locust 3 technology gathers data transmitted via satellite to the Food and Agriculture Organization. It then gives updated information about the current situation in the field in real time.
When you send it, the report by it's sent directly and on time when you are conduct control or survey. And up to the Roma, it's sent, and also to the region. The locust office in the region. So it is very important, and also it have many of the information inside of it for about the desert locust.
The desert locust is considered to be the most destructive pest in the world. A swarm covering 1 square kilometer contains 40 million locusts that can eat the same amount of food in one day as 35,000 people. The Food and Agriculture Organization says the situation is extremely alarming in East Africa. a region where 20 million people are already considered to be food insecure. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
Tunisia celebrates its Independence Day on March 20th, commemorating the country's independence from France in 1956. However, this year, things were different. Public celebrations were put off due to the COVID-19 pandemic. CGTN's Adnan Chouachi reports on how the North African country found alternative ways of revisiting its history on this special occasion.
Every year, the national event is celebrated at the Martyrs Square in the city of Bizerte, north of Tunisia. Many people still remember this special day, which turned the page on 75 years of French colonization.
I still remember my comrades who sacrificed their lives for the country's independence. I cannot forget the suffering in unoccupied Tunisia. But I'm proud of the achievements of the national liberation movement that forced France to leave.
Abdesattar Amemo is one of the descendants of the Beys of Tunisia. His ancestors ruled the North African country before independence from France 64 years ago.
Independence Day is still a source of pride after 75 years of French colonial protectorate. Tunisians forced France to negotiate. The liberation movement started as early as 1881 and continued especially in inner regions where the French army faced fierce and brave Tunisian fighters.
The political front of the independence movement was formed in 1907 by many national figures. Habib Bourguiba is still remembered as the father of Tunisians. He led the negotiations with France and served as the country's leader from independence in 1956 to 1987.
The road to Tunisia's independence was long and full of sacrifices because the French colonial army committed many atrocities, but Tunisians united despite their different ideological and political affiliations to put an end to colonization. Now we must preserve this precious independence.
Historians say that during French colonial era, European settlements in the country were encouraged. That led to an active enlargement of French and Italian colonists. The majority left the country after the proclamation of the Tunisian state in July 1957. 64 years after its independence from France, Tunisia is a free country facing many social, economic and political challenges. This year, celebrations and public gatherings were cancelled over COVID-19, but people shared patriotic songs and millions of posts on social networks. Adnan Chouachi, CGTN, Tunis.
Still in Tunisia, the number of people with hearing problems has increased significantly over the past 2 decades, and for many, going about their daily lives can be challenging. However, some volunteers are providing much needed support to the hearing impaired. Adnan Chouachi has more.
Manel is a teacher of English. The 29-year-old civil society activist has dedicated her career to a noble cause. She initiated a project to teach English through sign language to deaf Tunisians.
I created the first English teaching book that utilizes sign language entitled Let's Hand Speak English. I also developed a mobile application called Let's to allow the deaf to learn English efficiently. Let's is an acronym of Learning English Through Signs.
Nabil is one of Manel's students. The young man explains in signs language how deaf and hearing impaired individuals are always victims of discrimination. However, he has been able to overcome this handicap.
Since my childhood, I have been facing all forms of discrimination. I tried hard to study in an ordinary educational environment, but it was impossible. The Voice of the Deaf Association changed my life. I discovered news of learning with people who understand my special needs.
The president of the association, the Voice of the Deaf, has some hearing and speech problems. However, he is very active in the civil society. Rashid Hashmi asserts that extreme noise is still the major cause of hearing impairment in the North African country.
Extreme noise is very dangerous as it has consequences on one's health, but it can be avoided if we raise awareness and avoid noise-polluted environments. Yes, we can integrate the society with the help of doctors and specialists who make our lives easier with hearing aids and training.
According to the Voice of the Deaf Association, many Tunisian deaf and hard of hearing people often hide their condition from employers because they usually experience discrimination before and after finding employment. Civil society activists assert that the 80,000 deaf and hearing impaired in Tunisia are very creative, talented and extremely intelligent. However, they deserve more attention and support from the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Health. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And let's now go to Uche for your latest business news.
Thanks, Lindy. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Uganda turns to the World Bank for a $190 million loan to cushion against the coronavirus impact. And Kenyan flower farms lose 40% in sales as global demand shrinks.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off in Uganda. The country has requested for a $190 million loan from the World Bank. The loan will help the East African nation cushion its economy from the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. Now, the disruption caused by the coronavirus is expected to cut industrial output, tourism earnings, and the government's tax revenue. Finance Minister Matia Kasaija said the government will also approach the International Monetary Fund for help with a projected decline in foreign exchange reserves from 4.2 months worth of imports to 3.5 months. Now, as a result of the economic upheaval from the outbreak, Uganda's imports were expected to decline 44% in the 4 months to June. The expected widespread loss of jobs was likely to push an estimated 780,000 people into poverty. And South Africa Airways has suspended all international flights until the end of May. This is in an effort to curb the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. This means the South African carrier will now render services only on its regional and domestic routes. Now, the airline also says the pandemic and travel restrictions have resulted in a substantial decline in demand for air travel. The state-owned airline is under business rescue right now in a last-ditch attempt to save the national carrier. Now, the government has set aside about $1.1 billion over the medium term for South African Airways to repay guaranteed debt and to cover debt service costs. And in Kenya, flower firms have shed a fifth of their casual workforce and sent a similar number on compulsory leave. Now, the industry is currently struggling to survive the aftershocks of the coronavirus lockdown. Cancellations of overseas orders and travel restrictions in affected nations has hit that industry hard. The sector is experiencing an estimated 40% plunge in sales. This has now forced firms to turn on their 150,000 workforce in order to save their companies from outright losses. The Kenya Flower Council has warned that the headcount could drop to 20,000 in the next few weeks. Of course, Kenya's earnings from horticulture exports, including flowers, fruits and vegetables, fell about 7% in 2019 to $1.35 billion. That's from $1.46 billion before. This is mainly due to lower prices of flowers at the auction in the Netherlands. Well, let's head to Nigeria now. The government has reduced the pump price of a litre of petrol from 145 naira to 130 naira, which of course is around 35 US cents. Now, the government says the decision followed the huge drop in global oil prices. Nigeria's imports most of its fuel, which it consumes domestically, and any changes in global oil prices affect the prices at home. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with more on that story.
For many Nigerians, this is some good news at a time when there isn't much to cheer about the Nigerian economy. With the continued spread of COVID-19, international crude oil prices have slumped to below $30 per barrel. This has triggered fears of a possible economic recession in Nigeria, where earnings from oil exports power the economy. The government has now decided Nigerians should pay less for petrol.
As a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, you are all aware that oil prices have drastically dropped. And we know that this really will translate to a lot of sufferings on the part of Nigerians. Therefore, the President has graciously approved that the pump price of petrol should also accordingly drop. So the pump price of petrol will be from now $125 for now. If there is any further drop, it will even drop further.
On the streets, people have welcomed the news. However, not all the filling stations in the country have complied with the new price directive.
So now you can use 1,000 and buy food that can take you to a distance and come back. So it's a good development. We love it so much.
I was happy. I was jumping up, hoping that by now I'll be buying it at a lower rate. But I just bought the fuel now. It's still the same.
You know, the marketers, the problem with them is if the price goes up, they will change it immediately. If it comes down, they will not adjust it. They are telling us that it's a oil price, is blah, blah. So they are not selling like that now.
Nigeria spends hundreds of millions of dollars every year on petrol subsidies. The subsidies estimate for this year is over $2 billion. But the drastic drop in global crude oil prices has literally wiped that off, which is why the government chose to slash the price of petrol at the pump.
This is a golden opportunity for federal government to completely remove fuel subsidy. Nigeria spends over ₦1 trillion annually on fuel subsidy, and I'm not surprised that government is saying it's reducing 2020 budget by approximately 1.5 trillion per day, an amount that is equivalent to what we would have spent on subsidy.
Petrol subsidy is more of a political issue in Nigeria than an economic one. No government has been able to muster the political will to end it. And despite the current price reduction, it's very unlikely this government will go all the way to remove it completely. But while the public enjoys the new price regime, it should be ready for an upward review once the global price of crude begins to go up. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Now, COVID-19 has had a devastating effect on travel markets, the financial sector, and more recently on the energy sector. The response in the oil market has been significant. Just last week, the oil-producing countries of the OPEC cartel called for a deep cut in production of about 1.5 million barrels per day to support prices that, of course, are flagging now due to the spread of the virus. Now, this led to a split in the cartel and a collapse in the price of crude oil. Angelo Coppola spoke to NJ Ayuk. He's the executive chair of the African Energy Chamber.
How deeply has the coronavirus affected the global oil markets?
It's really hit the oil industry. I would say, for example, worldwide, we're going to see more than $1 trillion drop in the entire oil and gas sector, whether with transactions, with projects that are being delayed, or whether it's when it comes to crude sales and everything. I mean, the African continent, for example, we're already seeing about $62 billion that's going to be lost because of this virus. But that's just when it comes to crude sales. There's going to be a lot more when it comes to services. And so it's really taking a big hit on the entire oil sector.
How has OPEC's decision affected the flow of oil onto the continent?
So, for example, I just came back from Nigeria, and the general manager of the NNPC, that's the national oil company, was telling me they have about 35 cargoes unsold right now. So you cannot even sell outside, you cannot sell within, because after the OPEC decisions, the Saudis flooded the oil market with a lot of oil. They unleash a lot of oil in the market, so what happens? Now they even place discounts on the price. So African oil right now is actually more expensive because you're buying crude right now -7, and that is really having an impact on African crude sales and also even African LNG sales, because don't forget, China is a big importer of these products. And if China is not importing, or if China even gets a chance to buy it at a cheaper price, Africa is also still going to suffer.
Based on your experience, when do you think we're going to see this glut dissipate, or when are we going to see things normalize again?
Right now, there's a lot of geopolitics involved, but I think it's going to be short-term pain, but we will come out of this strong, because we're going to see some long-term gain coming out of this. So my prediction would be before the June OPEC meetings, we should see the market rebounding. We should see a solution going forward on OPEC Plus. And don't forget, it's not about getting prices to become very high or getting very low, because uncertainty is not good for the market. What we need right now is stability, and the markets will be stable by the June OPEC meetings.
Well, let's shift focus now. South African Wamkele Mene has been sworn in as the first Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Now, Mene was elected in February this year for the top job, beating about 3 contenders. He was the former head of mission to the World Trade Organization for South Africa. The new Secretary General will be operating from Ghana, where the organization's headquarters are based. He pledged to speed up the process of making the bloc operational.
Priority should be to rapidly conclude Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the negotiations of the AfCFTA in order to unlock Africa's full productive capacity. The second challenge to the global economy is the ongoing crisis, the coronavirus scourge, which has ravaged global economic activity, has a materially adverse impact on global capital markets, severely disrupted trade and global supply chains, and of course, has had a very negative effect on global public health. Africa should not despair and fall into despondency. From a trade perspective, we should see this crisis as an opportunity. Through the AfCFTA, we have an opportunity to reconfigure our supply chains, to reduce reliance on others, and to expedite the establishment of regional value chains that will boost intra-Africa trade.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but ahead on Global Business Africa, African airlines are headed for troubled times as the coronavirus takes a toll on all sectors of the economy. We'll bring you more on that at top of the hour. For now, back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Ruche. Well, let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on Africa Live. Coming up, dress codes and dancing, how the exit of Bashir is expanding cultural freedoms in Sudan.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
It's almost 10 months now since former president of Sudan, Omar al-Bashir, was overthrown. As the nation ushers in a new era, young people have seized the moment and are now dancing to new beats and showing off their new and trendy fashion. Let's take a look.
Dress codes and dancing. Sudan is seeing a new culture thaw after Omar al-Bashir. This is the new face of Sudan. The music is Tanzanian hip-hop, popularly known as bongo flavor. Since the ouster of former President Omar al-Bashir, newfound freedom is giving rise to talents unheard of in this North African country.
Before the revolution, our shows were mostly inside during events or things like that. But now that there's freedom, we're practicing in parking lots. We've started to work normally without any restrictions.
A few blocks away, this hip-hop producer, whose studio was dismantled and equipment seized during the protests, is now back in business. He's currently laying tracks for new local hits.
Revolution, change, freedom, our rights, our duty towards our country and how we will build it. There are new and rich topics, so it helped a lot and started increasing among musicians.
Omar al-Bashir rose to power in 1989 in a bloodless coup. Islamists who had backed him influenced him to introduce strict social and religious rules that limited freedoms and choice of dress, especially for women. The laws have since been scrapped, and locals, both young and old, are now singing and spotting trendy fashions.
The freedom that came along allowed people to express themselves and produce more work in the arts, including music. On the university level, we feel that things are improving. We expect the university to progress, especially given that the previous regime was very closed. It did not have room for many things, including art and music.
Women were on the front line in the protest that eventually ousted al-Bashir. Music provided the perfect background for the revolution that ushered in a new dawn.
We understand that change won't happen tomorrow because of the revolution. It will take time, but what's new after the revolution is that there is hope and that things can change. And it is in our hands to change the things we see as wrong in the academy, in the country, or at work. These are things that we can change ourselves.
True change may be slow, but the current musical and fashion revolution is setting the tone for this nation that now seeks to break the chains of the past. Hlanela Lupuwana, CGTN.
Coming up in your sports news, up next. Cricket South Africa takes drastic measures to curb the spread of COVID-19 amongst its players.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Cricket South Africa has taken drastic measures to try and curb the spread of COVID-19 among its players. The national men's team was recalled from their tour of India. The team arrived back on Wednesday and will self-isolate as a precaution, despite none of the players showing symptoms of the virus. Here's CGTN's Thuli Shabalala with more.
Cricket South Africa's acting CEO, Dr. Jacques Falls, believes that immediate action was required and that the drastic steps taken will assist in bowling out the deadly virus that has brought the world to a grinding halt.
We've stopped all cricket activities for the next 60 days. That includes the 50-over competition, the Morday competition, but also all other cricket and cricket activities. We've got a lot of activities within the development space during the off-season, so that's been stopped as well. We encourage people to act very responsibly. The world's in crisis. We've got to react in a way that safeguards lives.
According to Fall, the cricket governing body has not felt the full economic impact due to the timing of the outbreak of the virus, but is unsure of how things will pan out in the future.
We've been very fortunate in terms of the timing that we towards the end of our season, and there's no incoming tour for a couple of months during the winter. So it hasn't impacted financially that big on us for now. We've got to take into account the world and the changing of the world financially, and that'll impact. But for now, we've almost been protected a little bit, but we are planning, we are doing scenario planning. Again, we don't want to panic. We don't want to look too far down the road because we need data to react immediately.
Fall has heaped praise on the Board of Control for Cricket in India for allowing the Proteas to return in a bid to protect them from the COVID-19 virus, and intends to be back playing in India in the future.
Yeah, I want to thank the BCCI for allowing us to recall the Proteas. It's not an easy decision to be made. You know, there's big financial implications for India on it. So we will return. We will honour our agreement and our fixtures. But again, you know, we got to thank them for understanding in this difficult time. You know, the things that they considered was such that the players came first.
As the coronavirus pandemic continues to disseminate sporting activities around the world, measures taken by governing bodies such as Cricket South Africa to protect those involved are vital in containing the disease for action to resume. Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
Meanwhile, in football, Italian Serie A stars have come forward to encourage fans in the country hardest hit by the coronavirus pandemic in Europe. Napoli launched an online challenge to its fans to exercise by doing burpees with a video